amount, right? So some base level amount, right? Plus the slope times whatever we're taking home, okay? All right. So, okay. So, all right, now we're streaming on YouTube. All right, so let's get into this, right? Let's get into this and let's really understand, all right, let's understand this consumption function, right? Understand the consumption function. All right, so that consumption function is C equal to intercept plus slope, I'm writing this out again, right, times y minus t, right? So write it out again to signify that I do think it's important. How's that? Okay, so the first thing I'll say is let's interpret each of these components. Let's start with the intercept, okay? So the intercept has an actual important meaning when we have this, oh, let me scroll just a little bit for, yep, so there we go. What is the meaning of this intercept, okay? So when you think back to linear functions in the past, like you just kind of had this intercept, like it was like 5 plus 3x is equal to y. Here, this intercept is telling us something pretty important, right? It's the level of our consumption when our take-home income, y minus t, is equal to 0. So think about why that's the case, right? So if we have no take-home income, our consumption is still equal to this intercept, right? That's exactly what that's telling us. So another way to think about this is that we can change our level of C, right, our amount of C, but not change y minus t, right? So we need to think about what this intercept is really telling us, and these two things can kind of capture that, right? So what if our consumption goes up, but our income doesn't? That's going to be captured in the intercept here, right? Then we could also think about it as if y minus t is equal to 0, we're still going to have some consumption. That's going to go into the intercept. So I want to know from you guys, right, if we think about what this is really telling us, we are asking the question, what are some goods and services that folks are going to buy that don't depend on y minus t, right? So what exactly is going into this intercept? Like, why can this possibly be greater than 0? And if so, what's going to go in there? So again, I just kind of want your opinion so we can kind of think about what the meaning of this intercept truly is, okay? So give this a go, and we'll come back in just a little bit.
Somewhere beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me, my lover stands on golden sands and watches the ships that go sailing. Somewhere beyond the sea, she's there watching for me. If I could fly like birds on high.
All right, monthly payment candidates. Good.
It's far beyond the star, it's near beyond the moon. I know beyond a doubt my heart will lead me there soon.
All right, last 10 seconds.
The shore will kiss just as before.
All right, so what's going into this intercept, right? What kind of goods are we talking about here, and how do those goods actually come about? That's going to be, I'm not going to ask that. We'll talk about that though. But what did you guys say in terms of what you're buying? Yeah, still buying food, still paying for rent, still buying water, electricity, bills, utilities. Yeah, we're starting to see like a common theme here, right? The mortgage, housing, something about basic necessities, right? Child labor, probably not. I'm not gonna ask about that. Chips, mortgage, water, right? Yeah. So Yeah, so we're starting again. Maybe even cell phone bills. You can that's fine. That might be just something that just kind of is always you're paying all these things that are just kind of constant from month to month, right? So it's okay if you're out on time. Obviously, none of these top hat questions are counting towards your grade. We're just trying to keep this you know keep us connected, keep us engaged, right? So. All right, so does income change the amount of food you can buy? I like that comment and I like that thought. So, so the answer is obviously yes to some degree, right? But I think, yeah, so Jason's bringing up something about quality. So if you think about there's a baseline amount of food that you're going to consume, right? And it's almost independent, you think of it as independent of your income. And so beyond that, though, right, you could say you're going to go out to a restaurant more when Y minus T goes up or Y minus T changes or goes up or down, right? But it's going to be that kind of baseline necessity, right? Kind of baseline necessity that we're thinking about when it comes to what goes into that intercept. So we're going to call this intercept something specific. We're going to call this intercept autonomous or auto. You can think of it as automatic, right? Automatic consumption, right? Automatic consumption. So this consumption is just automatically happening, right? Consumption is automatically happening regardless of what Y minus T is. So some examples of this, right? Some examples that you guys brought up, right? Rent, water, food, right? I think just in general, like fixed expenses and basic necessities, right? Fixed expenses. A lot of people put utility on there, right? The utilities like electricity, I see that on there. Um, we can whether that's a fixed expense or a basic necessity, right, goes into that category. Okay, so and I'll put et cetera on there because there's certainly a lot of things that can go into. So do I mean automatic or autonomous? So I'm writing out autonomous, right? Autonomous, but it's derived from that. It has that similar meaning as almost. You can think of it as almost as automatic consumption, right? But the correct terminology is going to be autonomous, right? Autonomous consumption, all right? So this is going to be what we buy independent of our Y minus T, of our take home income, okay? So where does this come from, right? Where does, we'll say, the money come from if not Y minus T? If it's not our take home income, where is it coming from, right? Where is this money for this, food, rent, water coming from? This is where things get. I think it's a really interesting variable and something that we really want to hang on to, and really think of the power of what's going into this autonomous consumption or this AC term, this intercept, is that this is going to come from past savings, maybe loans, maybe friends, right? Maybe family, right? Could be something like a stimulus check, right? Is a stimulus check income? No, no, no. The stimulus check isn't income. Yeah, yeah. So debt. Yeah. So we could bring in, and we can think about it from the past discussions we've had. We could bring in wealth, right? So think about somebody who's retired, right? So if they're just living off their wealth, there's not necessarily any income, right? But then there's this wealth and investments, yes, that are going to be part of this autonomous consumption. So when we think about, something like the stock market does not actually, the stock market, buying a stock is not actually adding to the GDP, right? But it can affect our wealth, which is going to affect our consumption, right? So we can think of our those softer things that we almost ignored in the past. They're going to be captured right here. Like if somebody won the lottery, yeah, that's going to go right here. So autonomous consumption is our Y minus T. No, no. So autonomous consumption is almost the opposite of that, right? We want to think of autonomous consumption is going to be consumption when Y minus T equals zero, right? It's the opposite of that, right? Which naturally leads us into what that next part is. So when we think about our consumption, what we've done is we've simplified what it means to consume or how we want to capture consumption. It's a fixed amount of stuff, right, that doesn't depend on our income, and then some amount of our income, right? So when we look at our slope, right, we've got our slope here that's going to be literally our rise over run. If I go back just a little bit, I think I can use this right here. Yep. All right, so when we look at this right here, right, what's going to be the slope of this line? Boy, that slope is just going to be rise over run. How much do we go up as we move over, right? If we go up, how much do we consume for every dollar we move over? Would selling stuff count towards that? Yeah. I like I know exactly what you're getting at, Giovanni. That's a great point, because if you're saying, you're kind of thinking of the almost the under the table stuff, not illegal. We don't need to go there. It's more like if you do something like mow somebody's lawn and you get paid $20, right? It's almost like, well, selling stuff might even be different than that. I could almost think of that, but I do think that anything under the table, I think you can almost throw into that autonomous consumption. So, okay. So, but I like the point. I like the question. I like the comment there. All right. So we've got this autonomous consumption, this automatic consumption, but then we have our slope, rise over run, which we really can just go ahead and calculate as the change in consumption over the change in y minus t. Now, we can rewrite this, and you see this rewritten often in your math classes, and we're going to use it here because it's shorthand. Use the Greek letter delta, or just literally a triangle, right? Literally just a triangle, all right? Delta c, which means the change in c divided by the change in y minus t. Okay, so we can do this, right? We can do this and have this slope be just the change in c over the change in y minus t, because our slope is constant, right? We can set it up this way because our slope is constant. So we have a constant slope, right? Constant slope when our line is linear, right? That relationship is linear, right? So actually I should probably say relationship instead of line, because that's kind of implied there, right? When our relationship is linear. So when we have this linear function, right, we've got this slope that's not going to change. Okay, so I'll get to this y minus t in just a second. Okay, so another way to think about this is that we have the same increase in, we'll say, consumption C for every additional dollar we take home, right? And what is our take home pay? Y minus T. This is disposable income. So this is going to be equal to that income Y minus our taxes T, right? Minus taxes T. Okay. So, all right. So that, hopefully that clears that up there. The question about Y minus T there, right? So we're going to take the slope, multiply it by our take-home income. Okay. Now we're going to have as you can imagine, right? We're going to have a special name for this slope, right? The slope of our consumption function, right? This function that's depicting our consumption is going to be equal to what we call the marginal, right? So small difference, marginal propensity, right? The amount that you're going to do something, right? Your propensity to do something, and this will be our propensity to consume. So we'll denote this as MPC. So the way that we can think about this, right? The way that we can truly translate this slope into something that's meaningful that we can talk about is it's the fraction of our take-home income, Y minus T, we put towards consumption. That's what the slope is. Okay. So again, this is kind of like really digging into this function here, but it is important because what we have here is we've taken something that is really complex, right, which is going to be the biggest component of spending in the entire economy, and we said, look, this consumption is going to be equal to some fixed amount, autonomous consumption, plus the fraction of y minus t we put towards our income that we put towards consumption, right? Fraction of y minus t we put towards consumption, right? That's going to be our slope times the amount of take-home income we have, right? So we have a certain amount of take-home income. For every dollar we get, we spend a little bit more, plus that base amount. That's all it is. And then to complete this thought, right, to complete this kind of entire picture, right, we would say, well, what do we do with the remaining y minus t? Right, so we consume a certain fraction. What is that fraction? That's going to be our marginal propensity to consume, our change in c over a change in y minus t, right? So whatever that fraction is whatever that slope is, the fraction of each dollar we put towards consumption. What do we do with the remaining y minus t? We're going to keep our life simple, and we're just going to say you save it, right? So we're going to get a certain amount of income we take home. We're going to spend a certain fraction. We're going to save a certain fraction. That amount that we're going to save is called the marginal propensity, not to consume, but to save. Okay, so this is going to be MPS right here. So note here that if we take the marginal propensity to consume plus the marginal propensity to save, this is just going to add up to 1. Okay, it's just going to add up to 1. Okay, so this is good to kind of just have the full look of this page, because this is a pretty dense page, right? But what I'm hoping you're saying to yourself is that there's a lot of writing on here, because it's really telling us that these linear functions that maybe we didn't get along with too much in the past actually can be helpful, right? They can be helpful in us understanding what's going on. So that's what I got there. So we're zoomed out. Good. If you're looking for something else, let me know. All right. So this is everything, right? This is everything having to do with this consumption function. Okay. So if you're feeling good about that, right, you might be saying to yourself, okay, I understand that I got an intercept. I understand that I've got a slope, but like, how will this even look? And some of you guys have moved forward in the textbook and whatnot, or talked with your TAs. But ultimately, I have to give you some more information. I can't just say like, oh, here's this vague consumption function where we have C equal to autonomous consumption plus MPC y minus t. Right? Like I've got to give you more information than that. Right? That's where we can start. This is something you want to highlight. It's something that you want to be able to explain. And we do joke about it, like taking this stuff to parties and whatnot. But I do think it's important that you guys do try to explain this to peers, in your class, or folks that have taken this class, or just people who you study with, right? And say, can I really say what's going on with this function? Yes, it's some intercept. What does that intercept mean? What does that autonomous consumption mean? What is it capturing? And then we've got this fraction of each dollar we take home that we put towards consumption. So when we break it down like that, it feels a little bit more simple than just saying, oh, we've got a ton of stuff baked into this. We can represent it in a fairly simple way. Okay. All right. So let's dig into this. And let's see how we would really analyze the consumption function, okay, or derive it. Right. So let's give a simple consumption table. Right. Simple consumption table here. Remembering, right, and I'm going to go ahead and just copy this here. Remembering this right here. Paste and paste. All right, save myself there. Okay, so I got this table up here, right? I'm just going to start with the first two, or the last two columns, or the only two columns you can see. We've got y minus t, right? We've got 0, and we've got c right off the bat. Notice what's going on here. You should be able to say, when I write this down, when y minus t is equal to 0, that means that your take-home income is 0. When your take-home income is 0, consumption is still 2,000, right? So what does this mean? Well, write it out. When y minus t is equal to 0, c is equal to 2,000. This is exactly what we just defined up above. This is exactly our autonomous consumption, right? So this would mean that our autonomous consumption, right, autonomous consumption, AC, is equal to $2,000, right? Just by looking at that first row of the data, right? Real disposable income zero, take home income's nothing. We're still buying $2,000 worth of stuff. Well, boy, we've got our autonomous consumption right there. We've got more information on this table though, right? We've got more y minus t values, right? Go from 2,000, 4,000, right? And I've got it going up to 10,000. Yep. Right. And now what I want you guys to do, right? So a question for you. So this is a little bit more difficult, right? Because we haven't really gone over it. I'm kind of pushing you on this. Is I want you to figure out what that marginal propensity to consume is, right? So another way to think about this, according to the table, how much is this consumption going to increase if our disposable income goes up by $1? Okay, so that's the next part of this, right? Essentially, we're trying to get the slope of this consumption function, right? So we've already got our autonomous consumption, right? That's right here. That'll be right here. Now we need this, right? Let's figure this out. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, let's see if we can do this. So again, tougher question because we haven't talked about it, but I think you guys can do this. All right. So how are we doing here? Right? How are we doing here? So I'll open this back up as I talk about it, so you guys. Um, so every time I have to some reason I have to refresh my score every time the poll won't show up. Anyone else having this problem? It can be fickle sometimes. I don't know. Yeah, sometimes they say to like change your browser. I don't know if that'll be relevant here, but you know I grew up in the '80s, so we just always like you know hit the Nintendo to make it work better, unplug, plug back in. So, at any rate, give it a try. Yeah, give it a try. And that's why obviously things poll questions aren't gonna be towards your grade. It's to make sure you guys are kind of staying on track and seeing how you're feeling about this material, as opposed to making something that's making it be something that's stressful. So, Dad, you're like a kid of the '80s. I love it. That's what I would do too. But okay. So how do we approach this? Well, really, again, what are we getting at here? We're trying to figure out what is the slope of our consumption function. That's really what we're asking here. We're asking what's the slope of this consumption function. So this is going to be the change in C over the change in Y minus T, right? Over the change in Y minus T. And again, I'll keep this open for as long as that makes sense, right? So if you're still working through this, right, give it and keep plugging away at it. All right, so how do we do this, right? How do we literally do this? So I'm going to do this with colors here, right? But I'm going to say, look, how much does C change? Where do we get this information? We can go to the table here and say, right here, the change in C is equal to $1,200, right? So we got $1,200 additional consumption when we have this increase in our Y minus T equal to 2,000, okay? And we could have chosen any point on this table. I'm not going to change the slope. That's kind of the whole point of this, is that we don't need to change the slope, right? So you could have done the same thing between two other values and said between 6,000 and 8,000, we go up $2,000 in Y minus T, consumption goes up by $1,200. So it's going up the same amount every time. So then when we look at what the slope is, we're saying we've got $1,200, we're going to divide that by 2,000, and this is going to give us 0.6, right, or 0.60. Okay, how does this translate into the question here, right? How does, because you're probably thinking now like, oh, so 60 cents is the answer. And that is the answer, right? But the way that we would frame this is we would say, or we did frame this, is how much does C increase when y minus t increases by $1? Right, that's the way that we ask this question, right? And let's see what the responses are. So we got, yeah, we're close, right? So 120, you had to divide by, yeah, you had 1200 and kind of jump the gun there. So we're divided by 2000, right? Moving forward, it'll actually be easier than this example, but I want to push you on this, right? So here, right, what we've said is that y minus t, right, is changed by $2,000, right? We take home $2,000 additional income, and then we increase our consumption by $1,200. Okay, but that would mean if this is a constant slope, if we change our y minus t by 1,000, we would have changed our consumption by 600, right? We'll put 1/2 here, 1/2 here, right? That would mean that if we change our y minus t by 10, we'll change our consumption by 6. If we change our y minus t by 1, we'll change our consumption by 60 cents, right? So it's just on that linear scale, right? And we don't need to do these steps, right? We don't need to do these steps and say, all right, let's take one half and then take another order of magnitude down, then another order of magnitude down. You don't need to do that. What I'm trying to highlight here is that once you get to this point right here, you've got your slope, right? Because our slope is just telling us how much does our consumption change when y minus t goes up by $1. So here it's going to be 0.6 or 60 cents. That means the slope of our consumption function, all right, we'll say the slope of C is equal to 0.6. So we can put all of this together and say that our consumption, right, everything in this table right here, right, everything in this table right here, instead of having a point, right, tons of different points or an infinite number of options for real disposable income or disposable income, we can just say this is equal to our autonomous consumption plus 0.6 y minus t, right? As straightforward as that. All right, as straightforward as that. Okay. Everybody feeling okay about that? So there's a comment on Q&A that's like, are we still kind of in the weeds? We're still kind of in the weeds. Just hang in there. Because the thing that I want to do next is I want to say, look, we can go ahead and take this information and we can graph the relationship between our disposable income, y minus t, and our consumption. All right, let me write between correctly and nicely. All right, between. All right, right there. All right, so hanging on, right? We're hanging on. So let's graph this relationship and say all that stuff in the table, we can boil it down into just this. Consumption is equal to 2,000 plus 0.6 y minus t. Let's graph this, right? Let's graph this. So the way we're going to graph it is we'll say, all right, well, we've got our y-axis, we've got our x-axis. So this is going to be y minus t, our disposable income here. We're going to have consumption here. Okay. So we've got 2,000 equal to 0.6 y minus t. How do we graph this? The simplest way to do it is say when y minus t is equal to 0, we've got 2,000 as our consumption. When we go over, and before you draw anything, we'll see the origin of this here. When we go over a little bit, we'll go up, go over, and then we'll go up. All right, we'll go over, and then we'll go up, just like that. Right, and then we'll be able to just draw a line, right, that represents, right, the slope, right. So over here we've got an increase in our x, our y minus t. We take home more income, we spend more money. How much more do we spend? We spend 60 cents for every additional dollar we get. So now we just have a slope equal to 0.6, which is equal to our marginal propensity to consume, which is always going to be less than what? Right, so when we think about it as being less than, we're not going to spend more as we're not going to spend $1.50 when we get an additional dollar of income, right? We're just going to keep that, you could say less than or equal to 1, okay? So this slope, right, is just going to be our marginal propensity to consume, and this C right here, right, our consumption line, is just simply 2,000 plus 0.6 times y minus t. That's it. Right, that's it. And so what is this really representing? What is this telling us? we have a fixed amount of consumption, which is our autonomous consumption. That's our intercept right here, right? That's going to be our autonomous consumption, our fixed amount of consumption, right? That doesn't depend on y minus t, right? That doesn't depend on y minus t, plus the fraction of take-home pay we spend on consumption. Okay? So we've got our we just graphed this out, right? We just graphed out this consumption function. Okay? Now hopefully you guys are saying, all right, so all I've got to do here is I've got to look at this table that we just had up, right? The table from before. Just look at this table, note where the autonomous consumption is, note where the intercept is, and then just find the slope, and I've got the consumption function. Yeah, kind of. That's kind of it. Like we don't need to take it that much farther, right? The only thing that we need to keep in mind here, right, is we need to bring ourselves back to the story, the big story as a whole, right? What are we actually trying to do here? What are we trying to do? We're trying to, and we'll say, remember here, our big goal is to find out where y equals AE, not y minus t, okay? So we've got this additional variable kind of hanging around here. We need to somehow adjust or account for taxes, all right? For taxes t, okay? So taxes are there, right? Why do we need y minus t at the end? Okay, great question, right? So we're getting to that right now. Part of it is that we're going to actually bring it in when we talk about fiscal policy, the debt and the deficit. But also we want to be able to have taxes embedded into our model, right? And so where are those going to go? Those are going to be slightly different than autonomous consumption, right? Because taxes aren't autonomous consumption. Taxes are essentially what's taken out of your paycheck, right? Before you get your actual paycheck, right? And so it's going to tell you a little bit about how much you're actually taking home. But we want to account for that, right? So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to make our lives kind of easy, and we are going to assume that taxes are fixed. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that we can change the size of taxes, change the size of t, but what's unique about this is that t does not change when y changes. That's what we mean by fixed. When we say taxes are fixed, we're simply saying, look, taxes are what they are. It's not going to change. Or so I should say we can, not can we. Right? So we can change the size of t, but the t will not change when y changes. So change it to be whatever you want, but when y goes up, we're just going to keep that level of t constant. Now you might be saying, like, isn't that kind of the whole point of taxes, that taxes go up when our income goes up? Sure, and we could embed that into the model. You guys, some of you guys would be like, oh, I like the math behind that. Others would be like, please just stop with the math. Either way, your implications won't change. So we'll just keep it fixed for right now. So an example, right, or what we're going to do in our example is we are going to assume that t is equal to 2,000, right? Let's assume that t is equal to 2,000. So now, what does our table look like, our new table? Right, our new table will give us y, it will give us t, it will break those two things up, right? It will break those two things up, right? And then we'll have disposable income, which is y minus t, and then we'll have consumption at the end. So here's what we can do is we can say when that disposable income was 0, well, we knew taxes were 0, so that means y was also 0, right? Our consumption at that point was 2,000, right? The consumption isn't changing. But then when our y goes from 2,000 to 4,000, notice that I'm setting the taxes equal to 2,000, so the taxes aren't changing, right? Taxes are stuck at 2,000. So that means we're going to have our disposable income go from 0 to 2,000, right? We got 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, and 12,000. Okay, so what happens to taxes? this is what I mean by saying that they're fixed, right? They're all 2,000 no matter what, okay? So then we got 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, and notice that our consumption doesn't change, right? Our consumption is exactly the same as it was, okay? 56, and then 68, and then 8,000, right? So the table got a little out of control, but you guys are seeing that, right? Okay, it looks nice on the screen, okay? So given that we've got taxes, right, that we've added to this, right, instead of just saying, oh, we've got y minus t in here, let's go ahead and separate out taxes. And I think this is kind of nice because it's a little bit of a review. It's kind of like a semi-review of what we just went over. How did you get consumption again? Are you still using 0.6? Yeah. So this is just from the table, right? So I'm essentially backing out what that table looked like, right? And how did I get 0, right? I've got 2,000 minus 2,000 is equal to 0, right? And we got 10,000. Oh, I got that. Yeah, that got a little ugly there. Let's 10,000, 2,000. There we go. Right. So got it. Got it. Yeah. I got a little excited there. And where did I get the $2,000 in taxes? Great question. Really important question. I gave them to you, right? I gave them to you. So I'm telling you what the taxes are. I can't just say like, hey, guess what the taxes are? I have to give you some more information. Yeah. So and I will. I won't be. I will never hide that information from you. There's no point in that. So I would tell you like so. And again, if you want to change things and say, okay, well, what happens if taxes go from 2,000 to 1,000? Right. That would change your disposable income. That would change your consumption. Right. And we can start to think about that in a bigger picture sense. Right. Now, before we do that, so what does DI mean? DI is going to be that disposable income. And the question, yep. Disposable income, right there, right? And AE, again, is our total spending, our aggregate expenditures, right? Total spending, right? So a lot of new things kind of coming at you, right? Now, in terms of just the notation, DI, aggregate expenditures, AE, autonomous consumption, AC, right? The best thing you can do is talk these things out, right? So, it's some of you guys get this, feel comfortable with this right off the bat. But if you don't feel comfortable, just again try to explain it to somebody else, and then you get really good at it. Okay. So realistically, won't the tax change as income increases, or is this because you're still only adding 2,000, so 2,000 is tax? That's a great point, right? So it doesn't make sense to have taxes take up all of the income, right? And on the flip side, it doesn't make sense to keep taxes the same when your income goes up. So again, we could go ahead and incorporate a changing tax rate. I'm not going to do that. It would just essentially be a fraction. You can think of it almost as a fraction of your Y. It would just change. You could say taxes are 0.1 times Y. That would change your disposable income. It would just essentially change slopes. Implications are unchanged, right? So great question, great point. Yeah, play around with it and then come back and let me know if you want me to add some changing tax rates. I probably won't do it though. Okay, so now that we've got this though, right? Now that we've got this additional information, now we can go ahead and compare and see how it changes. We can compare Y to consumption. Okay, we're going to compare income to consumption because again, going back to our goal, we want to get Y equal to spending. Consumption is a component of spending. Let's see what Y and consumption look like. Okay, so we're going to do this mathematically first, and then we're going to bring this into a graph again, right? But the way we would say this is to say compare Y to C given the taxes are equal to 2,000. Well, remember, consumption was equal to 2,000 plus 0.6 Y minus T, right? That's what we found out from that first table there. But then we're saying, oh, the taxes are going to be 2,000, so C is equal to 2,000 plus 0.6 times Y minus 2,000. Okay, so our disposable income is whatever we make minus this $2,000 in taxes. Okay, let's take it one step further then and say 2,000 plus 0.6 times Y, right? Multiply that through, and then multiply 0.6 times negative 2,000. We're going to get minus 1,200. This means that our consumption will be equal to 800 plus 0.6 times y. Because we have 2,000 right here, and we've got 1,200 right here. Just subtract those, or subtract 1,200 from 2,000, right? And we've got 800, okay? So the reason I want to show you this, right? The reason I want to show you this is that when our income increases by $1, right? When our income increases by $1, what happens to our consumption? It's going to go up by 60 cents, right? Our C increases by 0.6, okay? Increases by 0.6. This means that the slope is still MPC equal to 0.6. That slope that we found from before, right? We've got the same slope as we had. Where did the 1,200 come from? Okay, so what we did is we took 0.6 times y, right? And then we've got 0.6 times negative 2,000. So here, right, 0.6 times negative 2,000 is equal to negative 1,200. So we're going to bring that down, right, and say multiply that through 0.6 times y minus 1,200. Okay, so what else do we know, right? Now, the intercept has a slightly different meaning. Now the intercept captures not only autonomous consumption, but taxes, right? This tax element here, right? And we don't necessarily want to go too deep into what happens when we have this income of zero, right? That seems like that economy is an odd economy where there's zero production, right? But what we're doing again is we're just trying to depict this relationship, and now this relationship looks pretty clean, right? We've got now, instead of y on our x-axis, or on our horizontal axis, y minus t on our horizontal axis, we got y, right? We've got income here, and then we've got consumption here. And we've got an intercept of 800 that's capturing, again, both autonomous consumption and taxes. And then we've got a line that was supposed to be straight. There we go, right? We've got a line, we'll call it C. This is equal to 800 plus 0.6 times y, right? Remembering that the slope will be equal to the marginal propensity to consume, which is less than or equal to 1. Okay. All right. How's everybody feel about that? Are we feeling okay? Feeling all right. So still kind of in the weeds. All right. So is it always 0.6 or is it just for this example? So no. We're going to change it. We're going to change it. I promise. We'll do different examples. So okay. So hang in there, right? So hang in there. All right. So what I want you to get from this, right? And this is, there's so much packed into this, right? There's so much packed into this, right? But what we can say is we can ask the question, what happens to our, we'll say, consumption, C, when income, move it up a little bit, give myself some space here, when income increases by $2,000. Okay? So when we increase, right, our income by $2,000, what's going to happen to consumption? So we got the table up here, right? Let's imagine that we start, and I'm going to put this in red here, right? So let's imagine that we start at an income of 6,000. We know just by looking at the table that this is going to give us a consumption amount of 4,400, right? Of 4,400, okay? Then, if we are increasing our consumption to 8,000, we know what's going to happen to consumption. We're going to go from 6,000 to 8,000 in our income, and then we're going to have our consumption go from 4,400 up to 5,600. We simply move along this consumption function, right? We're going to move along the consumption function. If you're saying to yourself, wait, I feel like I've heard this terminology before, we're moving along the function, right? The function isn't changing, right? We're just saying, look, when the income goes up by 2,000, we're going to increase our consumption along this curve that we created, right? That was the whole point of creating this curve. right? This felt a lot like that demand curve and the price changing, right? So we're just moving along the consumption function here, right? So when our income changes, we're just going to move along this. It's kind of nice because it's very clear that our income is causing our consumption to change, right? It's not this kind of potentially inverse relationship between price and quantity that we talked about back in week 1 and week 2. Here, it's really, really clear. Income changes, move along this consumption function, okay? So you can think about us as going from point A to point B, right? Point A to point B, okay? So if we think about what that means that changing our Y, right? Changing our income will move us along C, right? That consumption line. But then that begs the question, what will shift the consumption function or the consumption line? Okay, so there's going to be a couple ways we can ask this. So this, again, hopefully this is feeling kind of comfortable. Hopefully you're feeling kind of comfortable in the sense that, okay, so we've created this function. It's representing how much we consume for every level of income. If we change our income, we just move along that line. But then we need to ask ourselves, what shifts that line? In other words, what changes our consumption at all levels of income, right? What changes our consumption at all levels of Y, right? Doesn't this sound a lot like that change in the, doesn't that sound like that change in the demand curve, right? That shift in demand curve. We said, what's going to change our quantity that we buy at every price level? What's going to change our consumption at any income level? We can also say or ask, what will change consumption other than Y, right? So what's going to make you consume more or less that isn't our income, okay? So I'm going to ask for this, right? So we've got our income versus consumption. We're holding taxes constant, right? But now I want to see what this curve looks like. What exactly is going to cause this curve to shift, right? What's going to make us consume more or less, right? When, right, our level of Y isn't changing, okay? So let's give this a try. Another opinion question. What's going to change household levels consumption at all levels of income? Okay, give this a go here. All right, give this a go. I'll answer some questions on chat too. This is good. So a question came up on Q&A. That's great. So with supply and demand, when income changes, we shift it left to right. I like that. But when looking at income and consumption, it just moves us along the curve. That is a really astute observation. And the reason I'm glad it's brought up is because what's on our axis here? Well, our axis here is going to be income. So when our income changes, yeah, we're just going to move. I'm going to erase that. We're going to move up. We're going to move along that curve because that's what this curve is representing. It's representing that relationship between income and our consumption. Remember when we were talking about supply and demand, or demand, we'll go with demand in particular, right? When we were thinking about how much people buy, it was in relation to how much the price was. So it was price versus this quantity, right? So how much is this price when the quantity is this much, right? So what would change the amount that we buy? Well, price would move us along that curve, right? Because it was relating price and quantity. Here we're relating consumption and income, right? So because of that, right, when we change income, we simply move along that curve, okay? So what I want to do here, though, right, is kind of note here that I'm going to write this a couple different ways. And you guys, it's not meant to confuse you, but just meant to be holistic here, right? Because our taxes are fixed, we can think about this slope as MPC times 1. Our slope is going to be equal to MPC, right? And our intercept is going to be AC minus MPC times T, right? So you don't need to necessarily know the math on that right now, but what we've done is we've essentially taken all the fixed amount of the fixed components of our, we'll put right here, AC and T, and we said that's just our intercept right there. That's captured by our intercept, right? Then we've got Y, MPC times Y. Our slope is just still MPC, right? Slope is equal to MPC, okay? So this right here, let's call this C1, all right? And at C1, all right, What we know is we know when income is Y1, we're going to produce or going to buy C1. Okay, we're just going to say that. We're going to say buy C1, right, when we have an income of Y1. We don't even need numbers on here, right? This is point A1. So then the question becomes, what's going to change our entire level of consumption, right? What's going to make us increase our consumption, for example, even though y is still equal to y1? What's going to move us up to, we'll put A2 right here, in this level of consumption right here. We'll call it C2, right? So what is that going to be? Well, let's see what your responses are, right? Family size, taxes, yes, 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 but pandemic, price, not, see, now this is good, right? Because what we're doing is we're saying, actually shifting this curve is capturing something like the pandemic, something like inflation is going to be, we're going to bring that in a, think of it again in terms of the interest rate, and we'll bring that in all towards week 8, week 9. But it's, yes, that is also correct. So number of people, again, job loss, yes, some sort of shock like that. Although job loss, be careful, right? Because your income then is going to change. So it kind of depends. That one depends. That one's probably more of a movement, but it's still something that's, I think, a big shock, right? So why is taxes, right? Are we supposed to assume taxes are fixed? Taxes are fixed for every level of Y, right? So if taxes go up, right, it's going to go ahead and say, we have less take-home income for all levels of Y, right? That's so yeah, that's a great point, and we're gonna characterize that. But again, natural disaster, child moving to college, it's unclear whether that increases or decreases your consumption, right? If for a household, promotion is going to be kind of like income, so be careful on that. Yeah, be careful on that. Accidents, yes, yes, yes. Let's see, somebody brought up inventory there. You're a step ahead, but I like the sentiment. Let's see, environment, yes. Weather, yes. Spouse, yes. Savings, yeah, kind of. Depends on, you can almost think of it investments. So yeah, so lots of great answers on here. Lots of great answers, right? And what's neat about this is that we can actually capture these shocks or capture these changes in kind of two simple ways, right? And the first one is what came up in Q&A, right? So the first thing that we can think about changing our consumption function is going to be taxes, right? Taxes T. So remember, and I bring this up for a reason, right? Taxes do not change with Y, but taxes can change at all levels of Y, right? So it's a little bit of a nuance there, right? But like, again, what we can say is, let's imagine that taxes increase from 2,000 to 3,000. What that means is it doesn't matter what your level of Y is, whether you're at Y1 or whether you're at Y2. Now all of a sudden, right, your taxes have gone up, right? Your taxes have gone up. So you could be here at, we'll call it B1 right here, right? And if taxes go up, right, work with me here, right? Well, what's going to happen? Well, this individual, right, at Y1, they're going to go ahead and they're going to consume less, right? Why are they going to consume less? They have less take-home income, right? But it's not because income's changing; it's all because of taxes. So at levels of Y1, if that's your income, you're gonna consume less. If your income's way up here at Y2, you're going to consume less. So that means, let's see if we can get this right. That's pretty good. I like that. That means that we have C2, right there, right? C2 right there, because we go from A1 to A2 and B1 to B2, right? So when taxes go up, we take home less at all levels of Y. What does this mean? We reduce consumption at all Y. This means we have a new consumption function that is lower or below our initial one, right? So That is one way that we can shift our consumption function is by, in this case, we would go ahead and we would say taxes have gone up, right? Taxes going up, right? Oh, and thank you for that B1 versus B2. Thank you, right? So taxes have gone up. That's pushed down consumption, right? Push down consumption. Question came up on chat there. Wait, if you have to pay, isn't it you have to pay more taxes if your income is high? Again, we're going to assume that those taxes are fixed. That's exactly what fixed means, right? We can think of it as fixed, meaning, hey, taxes are fixed at 3,000. That means at Y1, taxes are 3,000, Y2, taxes are 3,000, Y4, Y5, Y10, Y whatever, right? Taxes are going from 2,000 to 3,000 for all levels of Y. That'll push down that consumption. So again, we could go ahead and alter that, but it's not necessarily something that it's not going to help us out too much in terms of our overall understanding. Okay. All right. So I kind of messed up here with the C2. I got a little ahead of myself with A2 and C2 and whatnot, right? But I could say here, what's going to move us up from A1 to A3, right, or C3, right? Consumption level 3. Well, we can go ahead and go the opposite direction. Let's go ahead and reduce taxes, right, to 1,000 for all levels of Y. So again, this is that differentiation between fixed and you can almost think of it as unchanging, right? We can change the taxes, but once we change them, it's fixed for all levels of Y. Now, when we reduce taxes to 1,000 for all levels of Y, now we've got more take-home pay, all right, at all Y. That will lead to more consumption at all levels of Y. So we'll go from A1 to A3 and B1 to B3. Right, let's see if I can draw this nicely enough. I think that's gonna work. Let's make those dots big. That'll work. All right, B3 right there. So our consumption goes up to C3 when taxes go down, right? When taxes go down, right? All right, so in other words, taxes increase consumption, decreases, taxes decrease, consumption increases. What you guys are gonna see here as you kind of reflect on this is that that's exactly right. And there's nothing fancy that we're doing, right? If I told you that taxes go up, do you think people are gonna buy more or less? So you're gonna say, well, if taxes go up, then people are gonna buy less. Ship that consumption down, right? Ship that consumption down. That's all we're doing, right? That's all we're doing, all right? If taxes go down, consumption goes up. That's it. That's it. So no need to overcomplicate it, right? We've done all this groundwork so we can have this nice clean line that just says, look, consumption and income are related this way. You reduce taxes, increase consumption, increase taxes, reduce consumption. That's all we got. Okay. So that's just one answer here, right? That's just one answer here. Taxes, right? Is just right there. I think it's probably somewhere else in here, right? Right there as well. Right. So taxes were said, but it certainly wasn't the modal answer, right? We got family size, we got number of people in the household, we've got different spending patterns, things like that. All right. So how are we going to capture all of that? Well, that is exactly the definition of autonomous consumption. All those things that you guys said, right, other than taxes, is that, hey, our consumption could change because of the pandemic, right? Well, how do we factor in the pandemic? Pandemic is just autonomous consumption changing, right? You're changing the amount that you spend, but not necessarily because of your income. It's because of something else going on. So same thing with weather, right? Why would you buy less during a snowstorm? Well, not because your income went down necessarily, but because you can't actually get to the store, right? So autonomous consumption captures so much, and that's why we talked about it early, right? As we said, okay, well, what are these things that go into the intercept, right, of that initial consumption function? That's autonomous consumption. Everything goes in there, right? So if you have more kids, what happens? More spending, more consumption, right? So C goes up, right? So if there's this sudden increase in the number of kids, or the over time in the U.S., the birth rates have gone down, right? So there's fewer kids, so maybe there's less consumption on that dimension, right? So that would have a reduction in consumption. Would someone slashing your tires count? I don't know. It depends if I don't know. I think if you needed more tires, I suppose if there was this widespread increase in tire slashing, boy, don't do that. But I suppose it's, that I guess the additional tires bought, I suppose we could count that because that wouldn't be income. So, but yeah, don't do that. I won't ask about that. I promise. What if you won the lottery, right? What if you win the lottery, right? Y isn't changing. More consumption, right? C goes up, right? Autonomous consumption goes up. Uh, so that's funny. No, it's an for any answer or any question, right? Okay. What about a housing market crash? All right, let's bring it back to kind of the motivation of all this. All right. So if there's a housing market crash, all right, what's that going to do? Well, the day that your housing value goes down, you don't necessarily have less income. However, you're going to be less prone to spend. We'll have less consumption. Our entire consumption function will go down. All right. What about the pandemic? Well, with the exception of groceries, and we saw that in our website from last week or a couple of weeks ago, right? If there's a pandemic, overall, there is a large reduction in consumption, particularly in certain industries like retail, restaurant, things like that, entertainment. Okay. So, so we can go ahead and capture something like the housing market crash or the pandemic as a change in autonomous consumption. So we can go ahead and I'm going to put this in green up here, right? If we reduce autonomous consumption, we're reducing our consumption line. If we increase autonomous consumption, we'll increase that consumption line. They just move together, okay? So we can just say, hey, the entire consumption is captured by all of this, right? And so you're kind of maybe sitting there thinking like, gosh, this is like really dense, and it is, right? There's a density to this because there's so much packed into this consumption line, right? But at the end of the day, it's just a straight line capturing autonomous consumption, taxes, and your income. Okay, that's it. So okay, so great question, Jason. I'm glad you brought this up, and it's kind of brought up a little bit about the when we were talking about income shifting demand, right? So what's nice about this in relation to supply and demand is we don't need to worry about this being left or right shifts. This is literally lifting them up or down, right? We're literally lifting up consumption or pushing it down, right? So we can think of it as up or down, and that's I think a natural way to think about it. Okay. All right. Other questions, other thoughts, right? So we got to bring this together, right? And we're going to be able to bring this together in a short amount of time, right? Because what we've done is we've spent a lot of time thinking about consumption because that's 70% of our spending, right? So consumption, I'll put this in, I'm going to zoom in here, right? So consumption is approximately 70% of aggregate expenditures, right? That's why we spend so much time on it, right? It's important to feel good about that consumption function, okay? But there is other components of spending that we want to consider. So the next group of spenders that we're going to consider, and you guys are going to be a lot happier with this, I promise. You're going to be really happy about this next group of spenders, right? These are going to be firms, okay? And we're going to say that spending by firms is going to be equal to what we call planned investment spending. Planned investment spending. And it's going to have an I with a P over it, all right? A superscript of P, right, for that planned. And you might be saying to yourself, wait, so this is different than our investment spending that we had when we talked about our GDP. And I'd say, yeah, it is different, but not by much, right? So when we say planned investment, we're talking about two major categories, and they do relate directly to our investment discussion back when we talked about GDP. So there's two categories of our original investment I that equal planned investment spending. The first category is going to be that capital spending, right? Capital spending. So buying machines, right? Machines, software. All right. We could say what else? Technology, R&D. All right. All those things that go into our capital spending. right? So that was what kind of we first felt comfortable with when it came to investment. That's not changing, right? Because that's going to be a firm planning on spending. They're planning on spending on capital. And then the other thing that's kind of a nuance, but I don't think that it was too much of a stretch at the end of the day, is new homes, right? So we can think of new homes as this new creation of a place where a family can grow, right? A family can produce family goods, right? And both of these categories, right? Both categories are planned, right? Both categories are planned. So then that begs the question, what are unplanned, we'll say, components of investment, right? What are unplanned components of investment? What are we leaving out, right? What are we leaving out of this planned investment spending? So we're going to say, okay, we plan to spend on machines, plan to spend on capital. We got the new homes. We're going to say that's planned. So then what else are we adding to investment that's unplanned? Well, you guys remember, right? I got really excited about all of those Best Buy computers that weren't sold one year, and then we sold them the later year, right? We got something like errors. I like that, right? It's a kind of a nice way to think about it. But our unplanned, need an end there, all right? Our unplanned changes in inventory are, by definition, unplanned. Right? We didn't plan to have a change in inventory. We planned to produce exactly the same amount that was going to be sold, but that didn't turn out to be the case. So we have a change in inventory. So if the change in inventory is equal to zero, right? So there's no change in inventory, right? There's no change in inventory. Well, then our planned investment spending is exactly equal to investment. Right? Planned investment spending is exactly equal to investment. So if you were saying back when we were talking about this, like we don't want to have changes in inventory, like that's not a good thing for a firm, you're exactly right. And it's coming back right now in terms of the entire context of the economy, right? So if we have no change in inventory, planned investment spending is equal to income. Before, right, when we were talking about consumption, consumption was just equal to consumption from before. So that's no different than it was. Here, our planned investment spending is slightly different than our original investment, potentially, but if there's no change in inventory, then they're equal, okay? So what's nice about this investment is we are going to assume that planned investment spending is fixed. Not necessarily a change in inventory, but planned investment spending. Oh, so this is just zero. This is like just definitely zero, like zero with an extra emphasis. All right. Okay. So we're going to assume that that's fixed. Okay. So we can have a certain level of planned investment spending, but it's not changing with Y. Okay. So just to finish this up, the last two groups, right? The last two groups. The next group of spenders is the government. And is that the same G as before? Yes. G from before. This will also be fixed, not changing with our Y. All right. And then our last group of spenders is going to be foreigners, or we're going to really just call it net exports, the same NX as before, NX from before. You can guess if we're considering taxes, planned investment spending, government expenditures fixed, yeah, net exports are also going to be fixed. Okay, so that leaves us with really close to what we have as equilibrium. Our aggregate expenditures are going to be consumption, planned investment spending, government expenditures, net exports. We're going to find when that equals our total GDP first thing on Tuesday, and then we're going to see equilibrium right off the bat, and then we're going to be out of the weeds completely, guys. We're going to be completely out of the weeds. So this week, though, on your quiz, you'll just see stuff on some consumption function. But other than that, you guys should probably enjoy it. It felt like a lot. It was a lot, but this is a big day. Really helps us out because moving forward, life's going to feel so much easier. So, guys, enjoy your weekend. Be safe. Watch out for Halloween shenanigans. Have fun, though. All right, guys. We'll see you. We'll see you on. Don't slash tires. Don't slash tires. That's Have a good one, guys. Have a great one. Thanks, guys. All we got moving forward, discussion section activities, lecture quizzes. Labor Day? That was a while ago. Veterans Day, though, coming up. This is all getting posted. You guys know it's all getting posted. All getting posted. Yeah, Veterans Day, the 11th. Planned investment spending equals I when the change in inventory is 0. We'll come back to this on Tuesday, I promise. All right, guys, we'll see you all on Tuesday. Have a